Summertime is right around the corner in West Michigan. Time is flying, but that's all right because Storm Team 8 has you covered as we dive into those summer months. I'm Luke Laster, News 8 digital anchor and host of the Summer Outlook Zoom call. Bill Steffen, Terry DeVore, Matt Kirkwood, Ellen Baca, and Emily Skydema are going to share their expectations on what we'll see outside this summer, what to expect at the lake, how weather tracking technology continues to evolve, and a special edition of Ask Ellen. If everyone's ready, we'll dive right in. Bill, the Chief, why don't you kick us off here with our summer outlook?
I think this summer is going to be a great summer. Now, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. There are some people, of course, that would like thunderstorms every day, and some people that would just like sunny skies for the entire 3 months of summer. But I think this year, what we first have to do is take a look at the situation that's going on across the world. We're in something that's called La Nina right now. You may have heard the terms La Nina and El Nino before. Those are relatively new, started back in the 1980s. We were checking the temperatures of the ocean water by satellite. And this year we've had a La Nina. It actually started last summer, and that's been kind of controlling the weather around the world. It meant that we'd have a big hurricane season in the Atlantic, which we did last fall, and a very mild hurricane season, very few hurricanes out in the Western Pacific. But for us, it's brought us a very sunny period. If you go back to last June and July, we really had a lot of sunshine. All 3 summer months last year, we had above normal sunshine. June, we had a record amount of sunshine. Summer was also warmer than average, but not super hot. We had 16 days that reached 90 degrees, but none higher than 94. It wasn't like back in 2012 when we had a couple of days above 100 degrees. So it was really kind of a perfect summer with a lot of sunshine, a lot of warm days, very few cool days during the summer. And this La Nina is still going on. So the first thing we look at when we're making a summer forecast is what was it like last summer? And so we gave you some of that there, sunny, warm, and just a touch on the dry side. We had 91% of average rainfall here in Grand Rapids. So we start with that as the beginning. Now, what do we think is going to happen? We think the La Nina is going to fade away a little bit as the summer goes on and go to a more neutral pattern. We also take a look at such things as soil temperatures. We take a look at the amount of snow cover there is across parts of Canada. If we get a good north wind, is that still going to be coming across some snow up in the north during the early part of summer? So you put all that together, and I think our summer is going to be a great summer. I'm forecasting temperatures to be a little bit warmer than average, about 1 to 2 degrees. Rainfall to be slightly below average. Of course, it's quite variable. You can get a big summer thunderstorm and a lot of heavy rain in Rockford, and it may just be a sprinkle in Kent City on the same day. But overall, it'll be a touch on the dry side. And we're going to be seeing a fair amount of sunshine as well. I think sunshine is going to be above average. So we are looking at an awesome summer. And with the COVID that we've gone through here, we deserve it. We really do. We need a nice summer around here to get outside and enjoy Michigan weather. Keep in mind, this is a place where everybody comes on vacation during the summertime, and we get to live here all through the entire summer. So I think it's going to be awesome.
Bill, what do you think? You think we break 100 this summer?
I think our warmest temperature will be around 96, 97, so slightly higher than last year, but I don't think we reach 100 this summer.
All right, well, moving on now. Emily, Lake Michigan water levels. Last year we saw the smallest beaches in decades. Can you explain that a little bit and then what that means moving into this summer?
Yeah, so last year, lake levels were something we talked about all the time. Really, every week we had an update on the lake levels because we had so much erosion and so much flooding and houses that were crumbling into Lake Michigan. And of course, for just the average beachgoer, you notice that your beaches were shrinking away. So those records were just falling left and right in 2020. So I touched base with a physical scientist at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Detroit. Her name is Deanna Apps. And I just asked her some questions about where we've been and where we're going. So a lot of this info is credited to her. So basically, 2019 was a really wet year. We had a really large spring rise, and then we had a really small seasonal decline. And when we talk about spring rise and seasonal decline, we're talking about how water levels, they usually start to rise late in the spring, and then they fall during autumn. But in 2019, there really wasn't much falling that took place. We kind of remained at the same level. So that's what set the stage for 2020, when we had monthly water level records that were just broken again, left and right. We broke records 8 months in a row, January through August. All of those records fell. So the good thing about this year, we're no longer in record-breaking territory. We had lower than average amounts of precip over the past months, and that led to a higher than average seasonal decline. So there's good news because we're not as high. We're not forecast to break all of those records, but just keep in mind our water levels really are still a lot higher than average. So right now we're probably at the lowest we're going to be for the year. It's mid-April at this point. This is probably the lowest point, and we're about 11 inches lower than we were at this time last year. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they issue a 6-month outlook at this point that takes us out into September, and we are forecast to stay lower than last year by about a foot. So Deanna Apps, the scientist that I talked to, she thinks we'll be about 1.5 to 2 feet, still higher than average, but about a foot lower than last year. And then one last thing, I asked her about that crazy rise that we saw between 2013 to 2020. Because if you'll remember, in 2013, that's when the water levels were so low. Those were when our records were broken. So I wanted to know if she thought a swing like that could happen again in the near future. The short answer is we don't know. And that's because the water levels are so dependent on meteorological conditions. So just as we're not going to sit here and give you a weather forecast for 2026, we can't really give you the water level forecast for then either. So we don't really know, but we can use that information to postulate that we will end up average again and probably below average again. It's just all very cyclical. So the main takeaway I got, our water levels are not record breaking. They are still going to be high this year though. So we'll still be watching those big fall storms and those windy summer days, still be updating you. We have a little bit of beach back this year, but still not quite the average amount.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. All right, so moving on now, Matt and Terry, your guys' topics kind of go hand in hand a little bit. Matt, we'll start with you. Tornado drought. You know, it's been decades since our last tornado. Let's talk about that and any other, severe weather trends that we may be seeing here this summer.
Yeah, just listening to Bill talk about the warm sunshine and the summer weather that we get, and Emily talking about the water levels, I find myself daydreaming at the beach. We are going to see an excellent summer, it looks like, but it's inevitable that we also get storms during the summer as well, and also severe weather. We see it every single year here across West Michigan. Now, crunching the numbers, I found it fascinating because the general narrative, you hear a lot globally, nationally, that severe weather has gone up across the globe and so forth. That has not been the case, at least not the past couple decades here in West Michigan and Michigan. Now, in terms of severe weather, I was crunching the numbers. I went back to 2020. SBC goes back that far, and individually here in Michigan, when you calculate the severe weather in terms of hail, an inch in diameter or more, tornadoes, and in combination with the wind of 58 miles an hour or greater, the average in that 20-year span is 483 reports of severe weather across Michigan. Condensing that in just the past decade, that is actually down to 365. So we're seeing a 24% decline in the past decade of reports of severe weather here across Michigan. $1 million question is, why is that happening? And there's a lot of speculation out there, but overall, we're not exactly sure why that is. We tend to look to the Pacific Ocean, what kind of phase it's in. And a lot of times when it's in a warmer phase, we typically don't see as much severe weather. Now, the last time we had a year with above average severe weather, believe it or not, was nearly a decade ago, back in 2011 with 582 reports. That, coincidentally enough, was associated with a very strong La Nina. If you recall the super outbreak down in Mississippi and Alabama earlier that year, you tend to see quite a bit of severe weather. Now, that shows up actually what we're looking at, and Bill actually highlighted this. We're in a La Nina year, but it looks like it's going to fade away gradually. Right now, it's in a weak phase. And the La Nina influence is typically greater in the spring months than it is in the winter as the jet stream weakens and actually heads to the north. But I still think it's going to influence our weather a little bit into the summer. Now, here's a graphic that shows you the influence of La Nina especially during the spring months when it really has the most effect on the weather. And you can see from the Storm Prediction Center, there is definitely a link between La Ninas and severe weather, from hail to tornadoes. And it's kind of centered very close to Tornado Alley, eastern parts of Texas, right into the Arkansas area, Mississippi, and also into Alabama. You recall already we've seen a couple high risk areas earlier this spring down in that region. And the question is, will this migrate northward during the summer? And I think the jet stream is going to be more favorable for us to receive more severe weather. I certainly think we're going to get more than what we've had the past several years. Again, the average right around 480. I think we'll come pretty close to that. So here's the official summer forecast. Storm Team 8, hopefully everybody will collaborate with me on this. I do think we're going to see an average or above average frequency of thunderstorms. And the reason why is I think we're going to see more of a northwest flow out of the jet stream. A lot of times in La Nina years, you get a big ridge out to the west in the western part of the United States, and then we have a sympathetic trough in the eastern part of the United States and the Great Lakes. And wherever that jet stream merges and collides with that tropical air coming from the Gulf of Mexico, that's where you typically see your thunderstorms. Now, will they be severe? Well, anytime you have the interaction with the jet stream, you have more wind shear, more directional shear. So the storms have a greater potential, at least, of becoming severe. So that's something we're going to have to watch for. Therefore, because the jet stream is going to be hanging around the Great Lakes, I do believe we are going to have an increased risk of derechos. Last year, we came very close. August 10th, we had a big derecho just off to our west, Iowa, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and just fizzled out as it came into West Michigan. We missed out on the bulk of that one. But I think this year we'll likely see one. Maybe two. So we'll keep an eye on that. In terms of tornadoes, I think we'll come pretty close to average. An average year in Michigan for tornadoes is 16. But again, most of the tornadoes we get here in Michigan, and we saw it this past weekend, are typically on the weak side, don't last very long, and do very little damage. Fingers crossed, hopefully that will continue to be the case. Remarkably, last year we didn't have a single tornado recorded across lower Michigan. I'm getting my notes right here. The last time we had above average tornado count was back in 2014 of 17 tornadoes. And in the past decade, tornadoes have been down 35% compared to a long-term average. And it's been down actually right around 24% in the past 2 decades. So that's quite remarkable. And again, in terms of tornadoes, I mean, Bill, we talked about this many times when we crossed paths at work. You have to go back to 2012, last time we had an EF3 tornado. And
that's right. That was the Dexter tornado.
Yeah, in 2012. Dexter
and that was the year it
tornado.
warmed up so much up in the 80s in March.
Was 2007 in Potterville. And in that 1977 was the last time we had an EF4 tornado, and it just goes on and on. So we are kind of in a tornado drought. The past, if you go back 30 years, past 2 decades, let's go back past 2 decades, we've only had 2 EF3 tornadoes. That's it. None stronger than that. So that's quite remarkable. I wouldn't mind if that trend continued, but we shall see. So I do think we'll have an average year in terms of tornadoes. Just whether or not they'll be strong, we'll just have to wait and see.
And when you talk about the difference in decades there, obviously technology evolves and technology changes. Some exciting technology, coming to you guys to use. Terry, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought it would be interesting to sort of take a walk down memory lane, just how far we've come in the last 50 to 60 years in terms of that technology, because it wasn't too long ago when the very first radar was able to indicate a hook echo. I would give you guys a quiz here, but I know you probably are all digging into your own research. In 1953 was the first year that a scientist was able to detect a echo on a radar. Now, back then it wasn't Doppler radar because that wasn't invented until decades later. The first time that a radar was used in a television weathercast was in 1961. So that was 60 years ago. This is the 60-year anniversary of a simple and rudimentary radar used in a television weathercast. Back in the 1980s, of course, all of the focus came to be on Doppler technology, which is the ability for a radar scan to detect rotation inside of a thunderstorm system. And then back in the early to mid 90s, the National Weather Service implemented the NextRad radar all across the country. It took them a little more than 5.5 years to get all of the states online with that. Bill, I remember I was working at Wood TV. You were working in West Michigan as well. Do you remember that advancement and how excited we were to get the NextRad technology?
1983 was the first time I used a Doppler radar, and I was so excited because it outlined areas where there was strong rotation within the storm. And I thought this could be an amazing tool for warning people ahead of time, because in the past we had to rely only on spotters.
Exactly. And so the radar technology is able to actually shoot that radar beam inside the cloud to detect if there's any kind of going on. And anytime you have that rotation, that would be ability for a tornado to get started, like the genesis of a tornado. And so back when in West Michigan in the 90s, when the NextRad radar was first unveiled, we had a lot of false alarms. The National Weather Service issued a lot of tornado warnings that did not verify, because you can often get that rotation inside the thunderstorm where a funnel cloud or a tornado never is strong enough to survive to come out of a cloud. Which brings us to the most recent advancement in evolution, and that's the dual pole radar, which actually allows two different ways to analyze that rotation, both vertical and horizontal within the storm cell. And Ellen, I know you had an opportunity to really dig in and utilize this technology already.
Oh, definitely. And it's been really neat to see it kind of come to fruition and together.
Yeah. So in our newest advancement here at Storm Team 8, we have upgraded to the Barron weather system, which allows us to look and analyze for something called a shear marker inside of a thunderstorm. And we've got some graphics that will do a great job in really illustrating what that is. It's able to pinpoint within a storm an area of rotation, which is triggered by a significant change in the wind speed. And so as meteorologists, that allows us to say, wow, what's going on inside that thunderstorm? Is it strengthening? Is this something that really will be causing the potential for significant damage? And then even the layers of the radar intensity can track from weak rotation to strong rotation or extreme rotation. And we don't typically see that kind of intensity here in West Michigan, but we know that even weak rotation, like we saw Saturday in the Gaines Township area, can cause damage to those areas where that would end up hitting. So that's something that we're really excited to be able to utilize. The additional benefit of this radar is it allows us to identify wind strength from weak to strong to extreme, which will allow us to bring our viewers the potential for a more threatening or dangerous storm. So it's really exciting to us to have this technology so that we'll be able to give more information to viewers about who's at risk and track whether a storm may be strengthening or weakening as it's migrating its way across Michigan.
Very nice. Terry, Matt, thank you. And last but certainly not least, let's move on to Ellen Baca now. Ellen, special looks at Ask Ellen. Before we dive into that, folks, that has its own tab over on woodtv.com. You go to the weather tab, Ask Ellen there with, can lightning help my grass grow? Why is there a halo around the moon? All kinds of short informational segments there. Ellen, what you got cooking now?
Okay, so I thought it might be kind of fun to talk about 3 weather myths that we hear in the summer, specifically related to severe weather. So I'm actually going to ask the members of Storm Team 8, and even you, Luke, to raise your hand if you heard this when you were small, because I heard all 3 of these when I was little. So the first one is heat lightning isn't real lightning. It's just generated by heat of the day.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people think that.
So while that's a little partially true, sometimes you see thunderstorms when it's hot outside. Heat lightning is usually given to us or heard or talked about when a storm is so far away that you can see the lightning, but you can't hear the thunder. And the thing is, lightning, every lightning bolt is so hot that it actually physically has to produce thunder, no matter what. So you can never have lightning without thunder, period. So if you see flashes of lightning in the distance, it just means you're so far away from the storm, it's just a normal storm, that you're seeing the lightning and you're not hearing the thunder. So for example, light travels at 186,000 miles per second. That's miles per second. And sound waves only travel at about, I think, 1,088 feet per second. So much slower. So eventually, sometimes if a storm is really far away, you can see the bolts of lightning, but the sound waves just peter out before they get to you. And the general rule is if a thunderstorm is about 10 to 15 miles away, you'll see the lightning, but you won't hear the thunder. So heat lightning is just plain old, normal, boring lightning. It's just far enough away that you don't hear the thunder. Okay, so that's myth number one, that heat lightning is special. Number two is that rubber can protect you from lightning strikes, whether it's rubber on your shoes or rubber on your tires. Did any of you guys hear this growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and like even my aunts and uncles will still say this at family gatherings, and I'm like, no, it wasn't true. So, no, rubber is not enough to insulate you. If you're wearing sneakers and a lightning bolt strikes next to you, it'll likely melt your sneakers if you get hit by a current of lightning. The reason why you're safe inside a metal car isn't the rubber tires, it's something called the Faraday effect, and it's that lightning is lazy. So if it strikes the car, it's going to follow the metal down to the easiest path to the ground, which is where it's trying to get. It's trying to get grounded. So it'll follow the metal cage of the car on the outside, has nothing to do with the rubber tires. So that's myth number two.
So no convertibles.
Oh yeah, and convertibles are bad. They do not have a metal roof. So if you're in a convertible and you're like, I'm fine, you're wrong. Last one is, if a tornado is coming, I need to run around and open the windows and doors in my house to equalize pressure. Anyone
Hear
hear
that one all the time.
Yeah. So this one is just, well, I shouldn't say funny because a tornado is not funny, but can you imagine like a tornado is coming in and there's one person in your house like, I gotta open the windows.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Tornadoes are intense areas of low pressure, but they're gonna blow your windows out anyway. So experts say, don't waste time going and opening windows. And by the way, there's so many seams and cracks in your house that it doesn't really make too big of a difference. Now, I will say wind is incredible. And sometimes if you get like a big confluence of wind, like if your garage door is open, by the way, sometimes that can pile up the wind on even a high wind event and blow out one of the walls, especially if you have not the best workmanship on it. But by all means, do not run around opening windows and doors if a tornado is coming your way. Get into your safe spot. It literally will not matter in the end if your windows and doors are open. So those are a few ask Ellen I just kind of hear that are kind of related to myths. So I figured they'd be fun to tackle.
Ellen, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that about does it for our 2021 Summer Outlook with Storm Team 8. Any other final thoughts, anyone?
Well, I guess I would just chime in here with the fact that we all now have these devices in our hands, and they are very powerful computers. And on this device, you can download the Storm Team 8 weather app, and that way, wherever you can stay connected, because we are here to interact with the National Weather Service and train spotters to gather the best storm information, but it's only beneficial to you if you have access to it. So we promise we will be there to deliver the information, to track these storms, to let you know. So please download the Storm Team 8 weather app and stay connected and stay storm ready.
Here, you took the words right out of my mouth. Perfect. And reminder too, to turn on those alerts as well. You can get alerts as well. So the Zoom call now live on woodtv.com, folks. If you head over to the weather tab, you'll find all that you're looking for. Thank you for watching. Have a great afternoon.